Everybody deserves a chance to participate in elite sports. The major challenge has been that it becomes difficult to allow a person to take part in the games in cases where the gender is unclear. In elite sports, concerned bodies like the International Olympic Committee require that all athletes should be categorized into two groups of gender as either man or female. Several approaches to its verification for participation of sports have therefore been devised to meet the policy. However, gender verification is a very controversial issue that has raised many debates of what should be done to determine the gender of a person who wants to compete. The struggle for defining human gender has led to a lot of research being conducted in the field of medicine and science as a whole. All the scientists involved in investigating the subject matter are trying to come up with a method that could answer the question of how gender should be measured. The sports bodies are trying to restrict gender disparities and group it into two categories for sports to ensure fairness in competition. In this case, they are trying to protect the affected groups regarding gender issues and to ensure what is right regarding participation is done. This is consequently making the researchers search for innovative methods that could be used to define sex. In the past, before the 20th century, sports didn't have female participants as athletes. Later on, females began participating in sports. The time in which females started to get involved, people had many issues about female gender. The matter that led to information of policy about participation were raised because of transgender people. This is based on the fact that various factors affect the involvement of transgender people in competition. One of the methods in which gender verification is obtainable for elite sports is just by taking someone's gender identity. This would involve dividing participants according to the perception of gender in which they think they belong to. This way, male and female participants would be identified without measuring anything. Traits for identification involves dominant genitalia traits and their way of life, including how such people had been raised. Factors like what they wear, how they walk, and the manner in which they talk, the restrooms they use, and so on, are amongst characteristics that differentiate men from women and are somehow good enough for measuring gender. However, the sports bodies have a hard time aligning this approach with the policies on gender verification requirements. They claim in such a situation, female participants who are not transgender who would be disadvantaged the most. This comes after several players of the Olympics were condemned after their winnings. Many claim that the transgender women were allowed to compete in sports unfairly because of their gender issue. They argued that their masculinity traits gave them the added advantage to challenge them, the cisgender females. Transgender people have been given chances to participate in elite sports in several events since they started involvement in sports. However, they have been passed through very serious methods that target on varying their gender. When a transgender person who has masculine traits, for example, is involved in elite sports to compete with women, very many issues arise. One of the issues about the participation is that they tend to dominate in competition over the cisgender females. This is based on the fact that men tend to perform better in sports than women. The male traits in them make it easier for them to challenge all the other women, and this has faced mixed reaction by people who consider their participation in sports to be unfair. In the initial policy of the 21st century by the International Olympic Committee, transgender athletes had to perform surgery in order to qualify in sports. An operation had to be carried out to alter their biological characteristics, which gave them the favor in sports and consequently made them fit in a specific sex category. Their outer genitalia status could be modified, and examination of their testosterone hormones was also done for a long period of time required by the sports bodies. Affirmation of gender by a government official was a legal requirement for involvement in sports. All these procedures were being taken into consideration to ensure gender-based dominant traits would not be used for competitive advantage during the games. A few years later, the policy was changed, and the transgender people could participate in elite sports without undergoing surgery. However, in such review, the hormone examination rules were not dropped. The method of testing the level of testosterone had been used for a lengthy period of time. This is based on the biological factor that males have higher amount of testosterone than females. The challenge occurs when the test should be done on transgender people. When the test is done on transgender female, the testosterone levels can be high. The sports body have been regulating the participation of such people as they are considered being more masculine than feminine. Their involvement in sports with women have therefore faced debate for a long period of time. However, the participation of transgender men is not associated with issues. The men are mainly considered to be less fortunate than transgender women since they have lower masculinity. Another method that could serve in measuring gender could target on the manner in which they perform, based on the fact that men and women perform differently in sports. The analyst method could be applied. Several standards of testing which the athletes could do regarding power are therefore essential for evaluation method. This would clearly show whether a person fits in the men or female category of gender. A person would therefore be allowed to participate of sex to which they belong. The main disadvantage concerning this method would befall the transgender female. It would lead to their exclusion from participation in sports. The main reason behind this is because they would show traits similar to those of men, which would mean that they wouldn't have a chance to participate in sports with cisgender women. Basically, giving them a position to take part would be a disadvantage. They would win the challenges in most cases. Based on my point of view, scientists are tasked with the responsibility to offer a substantial method of solving the issue of gender for sports. They can come up with the idea that will lead to creating a strong genetic evaluation method of the testosterone functionality. The goal will enable them to distinguish between transgender people with masculine traits and the people without them, rather than just measuring the level of testosterone. They will be in a position to deal with the issues as required. Importantly, it will allow fair competitions in sports for the women category of gender, eliminating all problems that sports bodies have faced before. I want to thank you for listening, and God bless.